And we are live. Welcome to the Listen to This Bull live show. This is the show where you get to ask us questions and we talk about bullshit in the insurance world. There's a lot of bullshit out there. We have lots of topics to get through. Today, I've got a special co-host, David Princeton. David's been a guest on the show before. Say hi, David.
Hi, David. Pleasure to be here, Matt. Appreciate you. Thanks for the opportunity to talk to your group.
Yeah. So I got David on here because I want to have an attorney perspective for our guest, Asher Ware, a brand spanking new, squeaky clean green PPA. And I want to get some of the insight that he has as a brand new, very young public adjuster. And what our goal today is to identify some of the things that a new PA should know, and some of the things that, if they don't know this, it's going to probably cause some problems, or if they don't do things this way or that way, top 5 things a brand new PA should know. One of those clickbaity kind of deals. That'll be good. All I have to do to get everything started is click this button. Asher.
What's going on, Matt? David, it's good to see y'all.
How's it going?
It's going. We're keeping real busy, but rocking and rolling as always.
Rocking and rolling. So, Asher, well, not as always, this is brand new for you because you've been doing a lot of different things with different companies, but you just started your own PA firm. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Started it about 8 months ago. I got involved and we've just been building up.
Yeah. What's the name of the company? Give me a little bit of background, how you decided to start your own PA firm.
Yeah, so the name of the company is Q Claims, public insurance adjusting firm and appraisal firm out of Denton, Texas is where we're located. Kind of like a lot of other people in this industry, worked around a couple of different companies, saw their processes, the way they were doing things, and was thinking to myself, yeah, you've been there too, I know. And was thinking to myself, like, I can do this better, take the good, leave the bad, push it all together into one company and get out there and help people. And so that's what I decided to do back in, I guess technically it was October of last year is when I really started working on that. Found myself a partner. And we went in together and started laying our groundwork. And so early on, we kept it more quiet as we get the company established, as we build up our client base. And only more recently have I really started pushing marketing more. And we haven't even fully started pushing marketing yet. Honestly, I've been too busy running and building a business to be able to focus too much on that lately, which is unfortunate because that's one of my favorite parts. But I got tired of what I've seen a lot of is everyone's trying to maximize the claims.
I hate that term.
They're fighting tooth and nail and dragging files out for years because they want that full settlement. And in certain situations, I can get it. I see it. But 99.
Hang on a second, Asher.
What's that?
April, come on. Better than me?
But better? Man, if I could be half as good as Matt, I'd feel accomplished.
If you're half as good as me at your age, you are going to kick ass. So, honestly, you've got the intelligence for it. Anyway, keep going with your story.
Yeah. And so, what we kind of realize that works real well for us is we approach our clients and we figure out what their needs actually are. Are you trying to get everything covered and do you want to fight for it? Or do you just want to get your home or your property put back together to where you can move back in, where you don't have to worry about your roof leaking or your ceiling falling down or whatever the situation is? And we found that, 9 times out of 10, almost 10 times out of 10, depending on the claim, those people just want to be put back in their homes. They don't care about maximizing the claim. They don't care about all the money. They want to come back home. They want to return to some form of normalcy. And what I really struggled with, I've responded to a lot of hurricanes. I think I've responded to 7 hurricanes now. And it's the same thing over and over and over again. People are living out of tents in their backyards, their ALEs running out. They don't have floors or plumbing in their home anymore. They're trying to plug in conventional ovens upstairs where they have minimum damage, and they're tripping breakers and it's a nightmare. And you see these people just breaking down in front of you and crying because they're like, listen, we've been dealing with this insurance claim for 2 years. I have not had a couch in my living room for 2 years. There's no floors, there's no walls, it's all torn out. What are we supposed to do?
Yeah.
And that wears on you after a while. That gets old. I don't like seeing people like that. You know, I don't want to see people suffer. And so if we're able to get the claim to a position where parties involved are able to make their profits and the homeowner can get put back in their home, that's what we're doing. And we're settling a lot quicker than other PA firms, I've realized.
Well, that's probably because you're actually focusing on what the policyholder wants. What you just said is actually something that most public adjusters don't know, that have been doing this for far too long. And that's that you have to look out for the best interest of the policyholder, and that means
a lot of people forget that we actually have a fiduciary duty to that policyholder. We are supposed to be looking out in their best interests, and you're correct. A lot of public adjusters forget that.
I think that we all assume what the best interests are, and to a public adjuster, you think the best interests are the most money that we could possibly get for this person from that policy that they're owed. They're definitely owed all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The reality is their best interest is what it is that they desire most. That's what they want. They want to be able to be put back whole more often than not. And that might just mean be able to move back into their house, even if their bathroom isn't 100% perfect.
No, it's
100% perfect the first time. So I think that's a very valuable lesson. And for you to learn that early on is actually pretty cool. I didn't really get that idea myself. Until probably like 6 or 7 years in, to be honest.
Oh, wow.
I remember very clearly the claim that I realized that on. There was
a story there.
Yeah, I kind of want to hear that.
Right.
So there was a contractor brought me a claim that had a tree that fell on this person's house. Their roof was installed the year before by the same contractor, and the tree hit one side of a hip extension off of this large mansion, and there was damage to the decking and one of the rafters. It was stick built as a rafter, and the adjuster wrote for a rafter replacement, decking, and that slope of shingles. And the contractor wanted me to get the full roof. I wanted me to get the full roof because I thought that's what the policyholder would want. And I kept telling the policyholder, hang on, we're still working things out. We've been able to go. I probably went out to this house like 4 times, proving that I couldn't go, I couldn't do these shingles without manipulating the other ones. And there was mat transfers being caused and all this different stuff. I was proving repairability issues. Meanwhile, the policyholder just got pissed off after about a month and said, screw it. I'm accepting the amount that they offered and I'm firing you because it's good enough. That's what I want. I never asked him what he wanted.
Right.
At all.
Yeah, and you know, that's something I realized too, working with several different PA firms, and the people that I was shadowing or learning from, never once was there a conversation where they sat down and said, hey, what is your intention here? How can we help you? How can we help you? Right. And that's the purpose of Q claims, is we're here to help the policyholders. And there's a lot involved in the claim process. There's a lot of parties involved. And we want to make sure that everybody is in the clear. But at the end of the day, it does fall back down to, what does the policyholder want? How can we help the policyholder?
I agree. David, you've got a perspective here. Freshly minted attorney. Like, we could almost do things that you should learn when you're a fresh new Green P attorney at the same time. But you were a PA for how many years?
Going on about 5 now. Yeah.
Are you still licensed as a PA? Do you have to give that up to become an attorney?
No, nothing I'm aware of. You probably see plenty of adjuster JDs out there. I'd put myself more in that category than necessarily attorney.
You don't need the PA deal anymore if you have the.
No, you need the PA deal. So, and actually, this is maybe a good point or lesson for everybody, right? Yeah. So you're a human being, right? And then when you are in a state and you get a license, so currently I'm sitting in Texas, and in Texas, I'm a licensed public adjuster. I'm a licensed insurance agent, right? In this state. when I leave Texas and I go back to Wisconsin, in Wisconsin, I'm a licensed attorney, I'm a licensed public adjuster, and I'm a licensed insurance agent, right? When I go to Montana, I'm just David Princeton. I'm not any of those things. So, for example, and this is actually a good lesson for a young PA to learn. If you got an engineer coming out to your project, is that engineer licensed in that state, or are they just another human being there? And somebody else is actually going to be reviewing that work product and the one putting the stamp on it who actually holds the license, right? So, yeah. So, you gotta know what you are, where you are, right? You probably hear about UPA, unlicensed practice of public adjusting, right?
Yeah.
Well, the unlicensed practice of law is real. How many times do you deal with carrier defense firms where the lawyer is, and I'll just keep picking on Montana. Hopefully it's a safe pick on, but I just don't do business there, right? So, but at least not yet. But if your firm is based somewhere and you've got a loss in Wisconsin and you're a licensed attorney in Montana and you're doing the carrier defense side of things, are you practicing law without a license in that situation? Right?
Yeah.
Becomes a very interesting, so now are they going to find a pro hoc? Are they going to try to clean it all up later? Well, by the time you get there, a lot of conversations have already happened. Were they just a super adjuster? Right? Things like that.
I'm glad you brought that up. I'm doing consultations during the daytime, and there's this one claim that we were consulting on earlier today with another PA firm, and we were talking about how they threaten us with unlicensed practice of law, UPL stuff, and they say, well, because you are telling us that we might be acting in bad faith or citing some kind of statute or something along those lines, then you must be acting as an attorney and you would need a license to do those things. Are you a licensed attorney? And I commented on the fact that they're saying that you need to be licensed is exactly the same amount of lawyering that you are supposedly doing. So they're doing the exact same amount, and you're both basically, if it actually is acting as attorney, which it isn't, you're both wrong there. So if they ever try to threaten you with that and they're not a licensed attorney, they're doing the exact same thing.
Yeah.
I have yet to
give you a twist on that too?
I've seen them pull that card before where they do, and there's a lot of scare tactics they'll use too to try to get you to roll over.
Yeah. What else do they do?
There's a few carriers who in every email, they like to point out that a misrepresentation of an insurance claim can be fraud and that they will pursue charges if necessary. And I don't remember the exact verbiage, but there's one carrier I was just going through with, I think it was Encompass, where they had that stamped on every single email they sent to me. It's at the top of the estimate. It's at the bottom of the estimate.
Yeah. There appears to be a witch hunt right now to find a PA firm that is overinflating things in such a way that they could pin it as fraud and actually get that through as fraud, because that would scare a lot of PAs from ever inflating some kind of a claim or something.
I'm sure.
But if they ever did that, then the opposite would end up being true, where underpaying would end up being fraud as well. So it doesn't make any sense that they're even trying. Am I wrong about that, David?
I think you're pretty much spot on, Matt. It's one of the things that's really interesting. So I happen to be physically sitting in Texas today, right? When you think of the way Texas addresses the underpayment of claims with their penalty, right? Their strict liability penalty that exists under the statutes. So that interest rate is there for a reason. It's there to say to insurance companies, make sure you adjust the claim correctly the first time. Right? You're supposed to be identifying the damage, appropriately estimating it, quoting it, bidding it, whatever you're doing, and pay it promptly, right? And failure to do so comes at 19% interest, right? How many times do you see claims where the first adjuster wasn't the right adjuster to be out? Then you get involved as a PA, the number goes from, call it 50,000 to 200,000. Then it gets triaged to a new adjuster, and that new adjuster looks at the same thing that was there, right? Things haven't changed.
Provides so much leverage, it's not even funny.
Yeah. Well, not only that, but it reinforces the responsibility, right?
You're absolutely right.
Yeah. And Matt, you made a point earlier. Sorry, 1 second, Asher. Matt made a really good point earlier about just, call it the general responsibility, right? On the unlicensed practice of law, adjusters have a responsibility to be familiar with the law and how it applies to their policy and the fulfillment of the promise. There is not a single insurance company in this country, and there's like 3,952 of them on my last count, right?
Wow.
There is not a single PNC insurance company in this country that does not have access to legal for adjusters, does not have some type of portal that insurance adjusters can click on with a state-by-state reference to tell them what the measure of the law is, right? Conveniently in a sentence. So talk about adjusting, right, and knowing what your responsibilities are. That's a big lesson, I think, for young adjusters to know. Like, you want to have
It's amazing how few PAs
responsibility
look up the rules though before they start getting into business. Same thing for contractors. They don't look up how to build. They don't look at the codes. TJ McCormick, world's greatest roofer. He just goes, don't forget about codes. Codes are law. This is something that is required. So they should know that as well, especially if they're licensed to adjust. And adjusting means estimating basically what the amount of loss is. So they should know how to do that and know how the codes work to do that. And if they ignore codes, is that acting in bad faith?
Can I give you something really interesting about code enforcement? Right? Like, how many times, while the code's not enforced, until I see a letter from a building inspector enforcing the code, right? Mm-hmm. This could be a bit of a hot topic, so I don't mean to go down, the abortion road, right? But literally, the way they got around everything from a Supreme Court perspective on abortion was the fact that the law exists, right? And there's state sovereignty and all this other kind of stuff. But the way they were able to challenge prior abortion laws is they'd go after the person, because that's how you bring an action against the state. You go after the person in charge of enforcing the rule. They just put a law on the books, and there's sovereignty. And that's it. Game over, right? Because that's the law, right? The speed limit sign says 55 miles an hour. You go 57. You're speeding. You're violating the law. It doesn't take a cop to pull up behind you to tag you with a ticket for it to be enforced.
Right.
It's in force. It's posted. It's the law, right? I find
in the way that I usually teach it is there's a looming threat of punishment, right? And I got that terminology from Chip Merlin on one of his blogs, by the way. I want to give him credit. Looming threat of punishment, meaning that you could get in trouble. It doesn't mean you definitely are, because there's somebody right behind you. There's no permitting office that has come out and to investigate. But if that person is going to sell that property and it has to be inspected before the sale and they find out about it, then they could come back to you and actually charge the contractor for work that they did improperly. So there is always a looming threat of punishment. It's enforced. That's all it is.
There's a lot of liability a contractor would take on if they do not repair that property back up to code. Immediate and down the road. I mean, you even hear of people, getting in trouble for OSHA showing up to their jobs, or you got the nosy Karen neighbor who wants to call in and try to start an issue. You may not even be doing anything wrong, and they're still going to show up and inspect and make sure that you are following those laws. And heaven forbid they do go to sell the house and there's issues down the road and they come back and now they want to file a lawsuit on you and go after your E&O. I mean, it's a serious thing. Codes are important.
So what do you think is the most important thing for a young PA to learn? Policy, building and construction and estimating stuff, or people?
That's tough, because I believe at least the first two are equally
part of the job you're doing, I suppose. But if you were a cradle to grave, that'd be tough not being a people person.
Well, and that's another thing that I've noticed with a lot of PAs and firms around, is they have a lot of the public adjusters who take over a file and work it from the beginning to the end. And in my experience, I think it's going to be very challenging to find a good, competent public adjuster who is going to be good at everything involved in public adjusting. There's different areas of processing that file that certain people may be better equipped to handle. And so, if you're doing the business development part of it, if you are negotiating with the carrier, I mean, even negotiating with a carrier, I don't know if you need good people skills for that. You need to be articulate. You need to be educated. But I know some people who are straight up assholes, who are not friendly at all, and they're still getting their claims paid out. You can be
It depends
professional.
on what state they're in.
You do need to be professional.
I feel like if you're a dick as a public adjuster, which by the way, my number one rule, don't be a dick.
Yeah. There's no
Number
need.
one. If I ever ask, what's my number one rule? That's the answer. Don't be a dick. But if you are a dick, and there's a lot of you out there that are PAs that are dicks, and contractors that are doing communication with the carriers, they're also dicks. About the only states that you could be in are the ones that are really high leverage, that have a lot of consumer protections, like Texas or Colorado, or used to be Florida. If you were in any other state, it's not going to work out very well for you.
Yeah, and I guess I should throw this out there. A lot of my experience does come from Texas. I'm licensed in Texas and Oklahoma. There's a few other states I'm in the process of or looking at getting licensed in for claims, but right now it's Texas and Oklahoma, and most of my experience comes from Texas.
Yeah, yeah.
I just want to point something out, Matt. So when you ask what's more important, right? Policy, construction knowledge,
people
or people skills. Policy is the one required by your license. You can't be a public adjuster on something that you're not versed in or have an understanding of, right? So to me, policy is always number one, right?
Was my number one for the same reason, actually.
Yeah. So and then construction knowledge. I always kind of put it this way: whoever I'm talking to, right? My days of writing estimates are long behind me, right? I grew up in the carrier system, insurance professional for 20 some odd years now. But my ability to go out and look at something, I'm pretty much almost back to that reasonable person standard, where I can just look at something and go, looks broken to me. Probably got to find somebody qualified to figure out how to fix this, right? That doesn't mean that I don't know how to scope a loss. That doesn't mean I don't know where all the little hidden damage is, right? That doesn't mean I can't look at an exactimate estimate and understand how the buttons were pushed and all that other kind of stuff. But I kind of operate a little differently than most when it comes to these things. But as a young PA, I got to imagine the policy is the thing that I would focus on, because the construction knowledge, if you got something broke, it's got to get fixed. So somebody's going to be there that will know construction. They ain't going to know anything about insurance.
Well, and that insurance policy, as I tell a lot of people, that's your rule book. That lays out the guidelines of what you're supposed to do for that claim. You have your duties after a loss, you got your exclusions in there and your endorsements, and all of that greatly impacts the claim. If you don't have the policy, you don't know what you're supposed to be doing without reading through it. I mean, you can get a general idea, but it varies policy to policy.
Right. And then can I give you a four? Can I give you a fourth one?
Let's hear it.
The duties of an adjuster. What are the responsibilities and obligations of an insurance adjuster? That to me it's not in the policy, right? All those guidelines, that happens to be something I do expert witness testimony on. So I'm very well versed in the obligations of that adjuster and the fulfillment of that promise, right?
So there are a few states that actually label out what is the obligation of a public adjuster, but generally speaking, most of the states just tell you what requires a license. It doesn't say you have to do these things. If you have the license and you're acting as one, there's a few things. You have to keep records for a certain period of time. Your contract has to be a certain way, but the actual role doesn't really get laid out, except for in a handful of states like Florida, I know.
Well, and here's the example, right? So we've talked about it. We've talked about licensed trades, right? Lawyers, engineers, public adjusters, and independent adjusters, right? Insurance agents have been mentioned. Every one of those has a trade association. Every one of them has somebody saying standards and practices equal X. There isn't a single one. I don't even know. I bet the Window Washers Guild, something that you might just take for granted, probably has a standards and practice on how to actually go about cleaning windows and washing them.
All right. So as a member of a lot of APIAs and past president of APIA, even in our bylaws and things, there was ethical guidelines, but I don't think that there was a standard of practice for public adjusting in those. FAPIA might have something because it's required by the state to have certain things done within a certain period of time. FAPIA, as far as I understand, they probably do. And they do teach as a part of their deal. And everybody has courses and stuff, but it's not really a standard or a guideline that's specific. That's interesting to note, actually.
Here's what I would say, Matt. I don't think they're different. I don't think they're different between a carrier's adjuster or a public adjuster. The obligation is this: promise fulfillment. You make available the benefits under the policy, and you can't misrepresent them. I don't know of a single state that says, hey, unfair claim practices, yeah, you can misrepresent things, right? Can't misrepresent damages, can't misrepresent the promise.
Correct.
That's true.
Yep.
So Tony DiUlio is another attorney that's does a lot of work on East Coast, especially the northern states. He runs an association I'm a member of, or is a part of an association I'm a member of as well. But you know what? If Tony starts getting on that, I think that the APIA would actually be a really good resource for something like that to get started. And by the way, David,
did you just blend all?
That is how it's pronounced. That was the first thing that I made sure that we voted on because I thought it was funny, but it also made it very different from other APIAs.
I love it.
It's necessary to understand what we were saying.
I love it.
Plus, it's fun. Anyway,
and yeah, at the end of the day, that's your job. You're an insurance expert. You're not a construction expert. You're not a people expert. It's
Asher. I'm gonna hit pause on you.
Okay.
Expert. So when I say that I'm an expert witness, right, I'm talking about a federal standard or a state standard that allows me to speak to something. It means I have more knowledge than the normal person. Mm-hmm. When you say expert and when you hold yourself out as an expert, there's different standards, right? I would be really cautious about calling yourself an expert or saying that somebody is an expert. Be a professional.
Okay.
Don't be an expert, right? I'm an insurance professional. I'm not an insurance expert, because when you have standards and practices and you want to talk about the difference between, a beginner, right, a professional and an expert, you're creating different standards of conduct, different things that you're going to be held to, right? And if you're especially a young PA kind of getting out there, right, and doing some things. So I've got 20 years insurance behind me. I'm 5 years a PA. I'm 7 months a lawyer. I would just say as a lawyer, there's a competency. Right? As an adjuster, I'm a professional, right? As a witness, I would take an expert designation. I don't know that I would ever label myself as an expert, because at the end of the day, if I go full expert status on those things, my margin of error pretty much gets down to zero, right?
That's fair.
And I always like the ability to be mistaken, right? And part of that is that I'm always learning every day. Right? Professionals make mistakes, right?
Absolutely. I mean,
so as somebody that puts
our goal is
out
to obviously minimize those mistakes.
Yeah,
but it's still there. To err is human.
Yeah. So watch the use of the E word. A lot of people throw that around.
So a public adjuster wouldn't necessarily call themselves a claims expert when they're a professional. That makes sense. A contractor that's about to do roofing on a job and estimate for it is probably more likely expert than professional, because they have to know how to install a roof. And that's a little bit more knowledge.
I don't think by David's logic that would apply.
So I'm setting a baseline here. So glad you brought this shit up.
I'm just going to keep shaking my head until you keep going with your baseline.
Carrier hires an engineer as an expert. It's because they're going to actually have them on the stand potentially. Although they're probably not anticipating litigation, they're still developing a basis for the denial that they're probably about to come out with. And so this is supposedly an expert. Even if they aren't actually expert, they're holding themselves out to be one, and the carrier is going to rely on that information as if it's from an expert. Policyholder is going to rely on the information from a contractor who did an investigation of their roof as if they are an expert. Carrier is going to rely on a ladder assist report as if they are an expert, and they'll even say our expert did this or that, even though we clearly know that that's not the case. So is it perception that's the issue? Is the policyholder relying on what a contractor or even a public adjuster says is damaged by whatever cause of loss? If they're identifying that, are they holding themselves out to be an expert technically? And if so, would that be an issue for liability policy? Take it from there.
Take it from there. Do you want the young gun approach, Asher? You want to field it first? Or you want me to just jump in?
I'm kind of curious to see what your input is, because I've always used the word expert. And when I say expert, I've meant, as a public adjuster, it is your responsibility to be well-versed in policy and claim processes, more so than your average person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what I would say is Matt, you're doing one of those beautiful things where you're switching contexts, right? So when you start talking about perceptions and you start talking about a word, and where you see a lot of these parallels is when somebody reads an insurance contract, there's words and then there's defined terms and then there's ambiguities, right? And so when I say, when you're out there, whether insert trade professional here, right? When you're out there doing something, lawyer, right, insurance agent, whatever, and you want to say you're an expert in that field, okay? You are raising the standard to which you are going to be measured for every view and opinion you've got. When you want to sit out there and you want to say that you are an expert, right?
Hey, hang on.
Yeah,
hey, Michael, shut up. I like this conversation. All right.
So not knowing what Michael's doing, but anyways, hopefully Michael, you're doing well. So, you know what, if I can, so why are we stuck on the word expert? Michael, it's real simple. It matters. So when you use rhetoric and puffery, right, and you want to go out there and you want to say, I'm an expert in this, that rhetoric and puffery will come back and bite you every time. So Matt, I know you like to talk about Stephen Badger and of Zell Law, and I enjoy your LinkedIn stuff. It's about the only social media I participate in.
It's so spicy. I love it.
It is spicy. It's getting hot these days. But when you think of all of the puffery and all of the stuff that people are putting out there in content land, where they think they have to talk bad about insurance companies, right? Where they got to be, I'm the expert to get you to maximize your claim and da 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 da. Words matter is what it comes down to, right? Words absolutely matter. They matter in the policy. It matters in how you present it. It's the contextualization of the reality. Matt, so when Matt is switching lanes, right, and he's talking about the perception of a policyholder, the reasonable person standard, right, the thing by which most things in the world are measured, is how would a reasonable person otherwise understand this thing? Calling yourself an expert's got a big deal to it, right? And so, calling yourself a professional, much broader, much easier. Letting people know, hey, I'm going to do my best for you, and I'm 7 months a lawyer, right? I'm going to research the law, and I'm going to become competent in it, and we'll do this stuff, and and then we're gonna venture out and we'll do this thing. Just know I'm doing the best I can with the resources I have, right? As opposed to saying, I'm David Princeton, 7 months a lawyer, I'm an expert in law. Come on, guys, like, know your limits, right?
Well, if and the reason I brought it up and the reason I got stuck on it is because it's kind of being contested at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
We're seeing potentially someone trying to say that you have to have a license as an engineer to identify causation for hail and wind and simple things that don't require you to really investigate product or anything along those lines. So if that is required, if an expertise is required for that, what is the expertise that's required? I can tell you there's a lot of engineers. We've all met with engineers that have no business being on a roof.
Oh yeah.
No business being there. And they're held out as an expert all the time. And whether or not they're actually an expert or being used as one, and they might be on the stand or not, you might be able to Dalbert them out of the deal. Their information is used as if it's an expert. So the assumption is there. The perception of what an engineer is someone that knows fucking everything, right? These are the smartest people on the planet. Engineers know how to do anything. Obviously, they would know if a roof is repairable, if siding can be replaced without replacing the house wrap. They would know all of that stuff because even if they've never done it themselves, they've gone to school as engineers and, they've designed toilets that work in space and other shit. So because they're so highly intelligent, it seems like it's a very reasonable thing to send out an engineer to a layman, to a juror, for a carrier to say, I'm going to send out this engineer to investigate, seems like the carrier is doing the best they possibly can for the policyholder to that juror, to that layman. Well, if a contractor that goes out and investigates and says the same things and technically is more expert than that engineer, why? The credentials don't line up, but it causes issues. So this expert idea, it's intriguing to me quite a bit. Anyway,
so Matt, the thing that I would point out is potentially the totality of somebody's experience and their knowledge, and those are the things that ultimately get tested, right?
Yeah.
So when you talk about, identifying causation and all this other kind of stuff, right? And Tony, I hope you won't be offended. I'm going to pick on, is it
Julio? You have to say it like,
right?
Julio.
So I'm gonna pick on Tony a little bit. I'm just
Sorry,
going to
Asher.
assume he's more seasoned an attorney than 7 months a lawyer, right?
Is this the comment picking on him for?
Not necessarily, just more so in general. You mentioned that he's
I'll come back to that
NAFIA
comment.
trade associations and all this other kind of stuff,
Yeah.
right? But when you have ladder assist being held out by an insurance company as being the expert who made a determination, right? I bet a guy like Tony would love to have that file on his desk. If that's the opinion they want to rely on in all of this, right?
Yeah.
Likewise, if that insurance company is going to rely on somebody who is just simply an engineer and wrote a report, right, about some type of causation that is just lacking all the foundations and everything else, and there's a contra expert opinion that can be garnered, and I'm using it in the context of the law, right? Somebody that knows more, and maybe that's where you can throw Tony's comment up, right? So like Tony gave that really good sort of expert witness definition. It's somebody that has to
let me read it for the
go ahead.
This is on a podcast. So this is Tony DiUlio. An expert standard is what we should all strive for. We should all be willing to be experts, and experts can make mistakes. The best experts can admit that they made a mistake and adjust. You don't lose credibility, you gain it, and in the eyes of a court, you are an expert. To be an expert, you don't need to be the best, just more knowledgeable than the average person. Is that the same level of expertise you would need in a court of law?
Now, real quick, before you answer that, I do have a question. What does expert mean to you, David?
Ooh, Asher. So I'm going to answer Matt's question first because I think it's an easier one. So yeah, Matt, that's the definition of expert witness right there, right? In that court of law kind of context. Asher, what does an expert mean to me? In the real world outside of, call it court of law and other things in terms of those different definitions, I see it as just a huge badge of liability.
Okay.
Right. When you want to throw that E word on yourself, you are opening yourselves up to a lot more exposure than somebody who calls themselves a professional. Right. So when you think of standards and practices and other things like that, in terms of different ways in which somebody has to conduct themselves. So law has the bar, right? The bar sets the standards and practices, right? Apparently we need to make one for public adjusters, but at least in terms of what exists in just adjusters, right? So without designating a side or a bias, right? When you look at just what the standards and practices of an adjuster are, that piece of it, right? That piece of it, I think being a professional all day, the moment you want to call yourself an expert in those things, you're putting yourself at such a high standard of exposure and liability that it just brings more problems than it brings solutions. It's like throwing a target on your back.
April M, she says, listen, Matt, Asher, if y'all want to call yourselves expert, you go ahead. If David doesn't like it, we write it down.
So my mom has a habit of joining podcasts and being on these things, and I don't want to infer that April is somehow your mom, but that's the kind of mom defense I like to see, just in case that's happening. So
I'm sure she loved that comment.
So not knowing who April is, I'm just throwing it out there. When somebody's got your back, right?
We do need to get off the expert thing because that isn't the point of the show.
Transition away. Here's the lesson for young adjusters. Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
man, I'm talking over.
So Chris has a question for us. Matt, I'm running to a ton of roofs that have been covered for hail damage by the carrier. The decking is too soft to install the new roof. The insurance is refusing to pay for decking, stating that the hail damage did not cause the damage to the decking, and are saying it needs to be paid for by the homeowner. Do you share this opinion? If not, why do you think they should pay? I got 3 things to say to this. If you guys don't mind, I'm just going to blast through that real quick, and then we'll get back on topic.
Actually, Matt, could we bring it on topic? So, okay. Asher on the young gun side of things.
Do you want that question back?
I mean, it's going to be a case by case situation, right? Without laying eyes on it, it's challenging to tell. But if you do have decking that has, you know, deflection, or it's falling apart, it's damaged, its layers are splitting apart, you cannot safely get up there and repair that roof, or maybe it doesn't adhere to code anymore. There are code arguments to be made, and there are OSHA arguments to be made. So I pull a lot of articles from OSHA, and I've had varied success with using OSHA for those arguments. I'm sure there's more to that if I dug in deeper, I could pull out, but off the top of my head, that's what I've got.
So and Matt, before you rifle into yours, when I see this kind of question come through, it's a policy argument. They're talking about the word direct. We only owe for direct physical damage.
That's where I was
show me a hail strike to the decking. Weren't the shingles in the way, right?
Well, and I guess it's gonna depend if it's an ACV policy or an RCV policy as well. That probably plays a part into it.
Not as much as you think, because ACV is calculated based on RCV anyway, so you still end up with RCV discussion in today's policies. But I think David's right. It's direct physical loss. So what is part of that loss? Everything that's in that same chain of events is started with the same cause of loss or causal chain. It's all in that same chain, then it's all direct physical loss. It's not a different property. It's not a different separate coverage. Potentially, there could be some anti-concurrent causation language that would eliminate the ability for the decking to be paid for if it's really strong. And there's a few policies that have some strong language there. But generally speaking, it is direct physical loss. What does it cost to replace the shingles? Part of the necessary and reasonable replacement cost of those shingles is the decking that has to be evaluated for replacement, or whether it can hold those shingles. So it's part of the replacement cost value of the shingles itself, which is part of the policy. They owe for that. So it's part of the direct physical loss. You would not have had to replace the decking if not but for the replacement of the shingles. You would not have had to replace the shingles if not but for the hail damage.
Right.
Potentially.
Yeah. And when I think of the law of large numbers that come into this, think of every single policyholder that has received a letter that says direct physical loss.
Yeah, it's perception, right? And then, they're playing on their perceptions, because to a layman, that sounds like something that gets hit in that moment. Yep. Only that one shingle. Like, they're even saying that if the shingles surrounding it during a replacement get damaged, that's not part of the direct physical loss. And it's retarded. It has been part of direct physical loss since the very beginning of time.
Oh, actually, Matt, 65 is that foundation. So is when the interpretation of the word direct, that's when you start to see that body of case law start to fold out and start to come out. So
is that being contested right now? Are they getting into that right now?
Yep. So so I have my own theory on where all of our current modern problems in the environment are coming from, but I put the impetus at COVID when they put $46 billion into the defense of that and got all these lobbyist groups got their machine moving in a direction. I think
they were pushing the physical loss side of that, not necessarily direct.
Oh no, they were pushing the physical loss side of it. But when you're putting efforts into things, you're not going to narrowly do it. You put $46 billion as an industry into it, and you're telling me that people that used to base it on ISO, standardized, insurance policy language, that just competed on price, their ability to underwrite, deliver consistent product, blah, blah, blah. So when you had consistent promises, what was good for one was good for all. That foundation is still present, right? We just call it Verisk solutions now. Right?
And it's not just in homeowners policies, though. I mean, the terminology exists in all property. So auto has this language, and so there's a lot of precedent. It's ridiculous. So this is how I imagine it goes, and maybe April M can tell me, because she's actually an IM. She's not anybody's mom.
No, okay, I don't know.
So this is how I think that
if she is, More power to her.
I mean, she might be a mom of somebody, just not. Yeah, okay. Not anybody on here's mom.
I don't know her.
Yeah, foot and mouth syndrome. So all these adjusters come into a meeting. This is how I picture it. And they're talking about all these things. If the contractor or public adjuster says this is their response and everything. And then they end the meeting. And as everybody's getting up to leave, someone goes, oh, wait, bro, don't forget. We only owe for direct physical loss. All right, bye. And they let them make their own assumptions on what that means at that time, too. Because if they actually sat down and explained what that meant to the adjusters, it wouldn't go this way.
Right.
That's how I think it happens. I'm hoping April M actually has a story that corroborates that. That'd be funny.
But what I can tell you, Matt, is that's not how it happens. It's not an afterthought. It's not the one more question.
I hope it happens that way.
Yeah, it's not the Columbo one more question moment. And yes, I'm old enough to know what Columbo is. So
yeah.
Well, that one went over my head. I don't know what Columbo is.
Oh, YouTube it. Go deep. Go deep.
All right. So we've mentioned a few things that a new PA might want to know, and policy seems to be between the three of us the thing that a PA should really study first. And shameless plug, I do a class on advanced policy interpretation. It's 2 days long. We go through the entire policy and we look at the language from each section, and we have multiple different policies, the language from that section from different policies. So you can see the differences between the different policies, which allows you to identify what the meanings of these things really are. It's really good. And that's on the website.
What base form are you using for that?
ISO.
ISO.
Yeah.
HO3. Okay. Yeah. Nice.
So that's the one we'll go through, but then we'll take language from a different DP1s, DP3s, HO8s, some of these weird ones. We'll just take a look at the language, but by seeing the differences in the language, you can see what the meaning of this one might be, because it's worded slightly differently. So if the insurance company says we don't owe for warranty, for example, as a part of a replacement cost, like we don't have to bring a warranty back because we don't owe for warranty. Well, it's not excluded. Well, it's never been a part of this. It's a diminution of value and we don't owe for that, and that is excluded. That's not what that means. There is one policy out there that specifies that we will not pay for warranty or to re-administer a warranty or something along those lines. And because a policy has that, you can point to the language in that policy and say, hey, here's a completely separate policy. And look at the language that they have in their policy. How come your policy doesn't say that if you're saying that it says that? Wouldn't your policy say this if it actually said this? That is the best and easiest way a public adjuster can win a ambiguity argument. It's about the only way, really, because otherwise it requires a court.
I like that a lot, actually. I haven't thought of taking other policy language and using that against them. That's interesting.
I mean, the only argument they're going to make is that, well, that's not our policy. Well, yeah, but your policy doesn't have that language, so I'm giving you.
But it kind of sets a precedent there.
Yes, it does. I love doing that. And by the way, the Farmer Smart Plan is the best one to use as that example, because it's extremely detailed. Terrible policy, but it's glorious in that way.
You guys know about call it basic, broad, and special and comprehensive, right? So your 4 layers of coverage. So one thing when Matt's talking about comparing policy language, broad, right? So I'm going to start at the second level. Broad can't exclude things that basic covers.
Right.
Special can't exclude things that basic and broad covers. Comprehensive can't exclude things, right? So when you think of the hierarchy of just even being able to point out between 1, 2, 3, and 5, right, in terms of those different form levels, that's a powerful thing. And if I can plug a book that's not Matt's, so Bill Wilson's When Words Collide, right? Actually, I think it's an Amazon top 100 bestseller.
Is it really?
I think it is. He posted something on his LinkedIn recently about that. I could be misquoting it, but it's up there in the bestsellers. And I would strongly recommend, if you're a young public adjuster, that's a good one. That's a very good one to get. And
what did you say that was called again?
So Bill Wilson's the author, insurancecommentary.com, and it's called When Words Collide.
When Words Collide.
Yep. So Bill Wilson's OG ISO guy. He's now retired. Plays in a band called the Spiders.
Oh, he plays in a band? He's the guy. What he talks about whenever someone says, "Read the
RTFP.
full policy."
RTFP.
That's it.
RTFP. That's RTFP. I don't know if he's got T-shirts, but he should. So,
he should, because it's read the fucking policy, and I can say that on my podcast because I'm that kind of a guy.
I've never known the F to stand for that.
Yeah. No. Okay. I'm going to go back to a question that Jake Beck asked early on, and I ignored. He'd like to know about your experience, Asher, with compromise settlements, and maybe you haven't done any, but I'd like to know as well.
Now, when you say compromise settlement, do you mean where you're compromising and settling that claim?
Yeah. So a compromise settlement wouldn't be like we're agreeing to these line items. It's we're agreeing to this dollar amount.
Right.
Right. That's a compromise settlement.
Well, I set the I usually start that off with saying like, hey, first of all, here's what it should be. Here's what we're willing to do to settle this claim. Right? We don't disagree that our evaluations are wrong or inaccurate. They are accurate. But for the sake of the policyholder, we are willing to negotiate on a few of these. And in my experience, it's the quickest way to settle claims. I've seen a lot of files where they're fighting over, honestly, pennies on the dollar. And it just doesn't.
That's true. This is something that happens a lot in the state of Florida. I don't know if it happens a lot in most other states with PAs. A lot of PAs don't know to even try for this. When I teach the PA 101 class, one of the things that I teach is how to go from a stone wall where you just have to get an attorney to, instead of getting that attorney, move to a compromise settlement. Mm-hmm. Because once you get to the point where they're saying our position stands, or they're saying, we agree with our expert and we're closing the claim, whatever it is, where you've got them, you've painted them into a corner where it's a yes or no question. They can't answer it, because if they do, they are implicating themselves in bad faith or setting a precedent that's going to have long-term consequences for them as a company. They can't do that. Their legal team's not going to allow them to agree that they've done wrong. So they're at this point where either they agree that they've done wrong and pay the claim, which could be a problem, or they stonewall and say, sue us. And then David gets involved as an attorney, and it becomes a compromise settlement pre-lit, basically, outside of any kind of a litigation scenario. File suit, but then they settle. Mm-hmm. And they settle outside of court. Well, that's basically a compromise settlement. So if a public adjuster gets to that point, what they can do is recognize that if that adjuster actually answers that question or agrees that you've been right this whole time, or admits that they misrepresented the policy, whatever the argument has ended up being, that it's a long-term consequence for them. You can take that burden off of them and give them a different option. Say, listen, I don't need you to agree with me. I don't need you to set some kind of a precedent. I don't need you to define the word that's not defined in your policy right now. I've already talked to the policyholder, and you better have actually done that, by the way. I've talked to the policyholder. We've both agreed that we would take, or that they would accept, a compromise settlement in the amount of X. And we say compromise specifically because that eliminates all of the past argument, all of that bullshit. None of the dollar amount is allocated for anything specific. And they don't even have to say that their policy does or doesn't cover anything, because it's a compromise. So we say compromise settlement in the amount of X. And it's a negotiation. It's a negotiation. So find some negotiation books, figure out what kind of dollar amount you want to start with. And I'm sure David could give you some good books for that kind of thing.
Never split the
transfer that argument. Then suddenly it's not a line by line argument that you've been dealing with. It's not a coverage issue. It's not someone getting so pissed off that they just want to tell you no for no reason because you painted them into a corner because you were doing your job. Sometimes you have to go there to be able to settle the claim. And I think it's very powerful. For my company, we did that. We did that often when it got to that point. They didn't always agree to it, but we'd say, listen, take that to your manager and get back to me. Yep. And we would allow them to get off the phone, because that person you're talking to doesn't have the authority to say yes or no to that, obviously. So they have to take it with somebody anyway. So, and you're probably going to end up having to sign a release of some kind. Anything to add to that?
Probably the thing I would add to it is when you are trying to go in and do a compromise settlement and you're trying to have these conversations, is make sure you've asked all the right questions before you even go into it, so that you understand the clarity of their position, that you understand if, like, have they told you their investigation is concluded? Is there any additional evidence that they would like to see in order to change their mind? Right? Like, if it's not truly a closed dialogue where they have issued their final position, coverage denial, whatever the case is, what does every coverage denial end with? But if there's other information you'd like us to consider, please submit it.
Yeah.
Right?
Sometimes
So they have,
that's a good point.
yeah, like if they built these things in, like if you don't know that they are done, right? Ask them what they want. Go out and find it and get it. Right? Because until they've foreclosed it, asking to compromise something or having an attorney involved or all this other kind of stuff, the adjustment of the loss never ends, right? I gave it to an attorney. The attorney filed suit. The adjustment of the claim is still going on.
Right.
Right? I've demanded appraisal. We're in appraisal. The adjustment of the claim is still going on. They found new damage in appraisal, right? The adjustment of the claim is still going on. So just, never basically sign them up, turn them over, walk away, because that's a surefire way to not do your job as an adjuster, right? Public or
yes, it's a carrier specific thing. If some are more willing than others to do so, and yes,
yeah.
I find that if the carrier does any work in Florida, they're more likely to do that because it's so often utilized in Florida to avoid litigation on the carrier side. Even outside of that particular pattern, I haven't noticed a specific pattern.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily have a pattern analysis, but if you're getting to that point, often you are likely doing it skillfully because it's your desired method of resolution. Just like if you are talking about line items in an exactament estimate, which my opinion of exactament is it's a language that allows people to put dollars to construction, right? So if that's your comfort of conversation, you're likely leaning into that.
Yeah.
People tend to stay with what they're comfortable with, right?
I do want to point this out because we were talking about Bill Wilson. Tony DiUlio has pointed out that the PAGPS 2024 conference, which is PAGPS2024.com, Bill Wilson is actually going to be speaking. And now I'm really mad that I can't be there, Tony. Damn it. He asked me to speak at the thing, and they moved the date, and I'd already scheduled my own little thing going on at that time. I was like, I want to see Bill Wilson.
It sucks when you schedule and get stuff set up, and then suddenly they got to move it, and then again, and keep moving it.
All right. Well, either way, I appreciate you guys going through all this with us, Asher. It's been actually quite enlightening. You have a strong head on your shoulders, my friend.
Thank you, Matt.
I'm going to talk about the sponsors real quick. Claim Titan, if you are not aware, is a CRM for public adjusters, but also now for appraisers, contractors, and supplement companies, all in one. And it's actually an excellent program that has everything that you could possibly, or all the major things that you need in there. And it's actually really easy and not complex. And the billing and the monetary side of that is actually, it's actually really good. I'm so impressed with the program. I love Eric, the guy that does the thing. Building Experts Institute is an online school that I'm involved in. I got a commercial to play for that real quick. There's a lot of bullshit in this industry. Poor education, inaccurate testing, and unethical tactics are seen throughout. I've dedicated my profession to cutting through the noise and providing reliable information in good faith so that we can be an industry of excellence.
Matt Mulholland is an absolute legend. I take every training that he does. I tell everybody to take everything that you can with him.
So Matt, as an instructor, is awesome.
He's able to communicate information at a high level.
He's incredible. I mean, he thinks about things in a way that's just completely different than anyone I've ever met.
I am Matthew Mulholland. Okay, that was a different video than I thought I was playing.
That was a cinematic masterpiece, though.
That was pretty fucking cool.
I like your videos. Is Jonathan still doing all of that?
That was Jonathan, clearly.
He's amazing, dude. He's
ever that good. It's definitely him. And he's one of my partners at the Building Experts Institute. If you guys haven't taken a look at that, So $109 a month, and you get access to every online courses there. We just dropped a week and a half ago, Repairability of Asphalt Shingles, taught by Chad Williams. Chad Williams is the engineer that wrote the National Academy of Forensic Engineers methodology on this, the repairability assessment method for asphalt composition shingle roof systems. It's a very long freaking name, whatever. The National Academy of Forensic Engineers document that is currently being challenged by every insurance company suddenly. And they're saying that you have to be a member in order to be able to use it. I saw that earlier today. That one was a funny one. Hook Agency, if you're a contractor, they do marketing for roofers specifically, and they're really good at it. They're so good at marketing, they got me, a guy that is terrified of needles, to get a tattoo at a roofing conference. That's crazy. I would never have thought I'd ever have a tattoo. American Policyholder Association, if you're not a member, become one. They are dedicated to uncovering insurance fraud committed by insurance companies. And then there is Huggins Law Firm. Remington was unable to be on the show today. He just had his very first baby. Congratulations to Remington and Smith Huggins. Kid's name is Smith. It's a freaking cool name.
Nice.
That's a cool name. And obviously, listen to this, but you guys just saw a lot of that. I appreciate you guys being on. David, you might end up getting asked to do a few more of these while Remington is out, if that's cool with you.
Yeah, just schedule accordingly.
Sweet. We will see you guys next Wednesday. This is our new time. It is 5 p.m. Eastern on Wednesdays now. It's the only way I can get this done while traveling. You guys have a good one. I'll see you next week.